Hello, hello, fearless listeners. Are you ready for another episode of Let Fear Bounce? It's the podcast that's all about conquering challenges and facing our fears. I'm your host, Kim Langling, and each week we'll dive into inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you turn your fear into your greatest ally. So sit back, relax, grab that cup of coffee, and let's discover how to make fear our bouncing board towards a life filled with endless possibilities right here on Let Fear Bounce. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let Fear Bounce. This is Kim Langling, your host, and I am so glad that you are deciding to spend a little bit of your time today with myself and my guest today, Moshaty. Now, she is welcome. Now, Mo is a genre screenwriter, author, and lecturer. Her background as a trauma specialist and behavioral therapist has provided a sturdy foundation for what she writes in, a concentration on psychological and possession horror. Yes. Scary stuff. She writes this scary stuff. She's also a journalist and co-founder with Nyx Horror Collective and co-producer of the 13 Minutes of Horror Film Festival featured on the Shudder Channel. And as a core member of Nyx, she has recently partnered with Stowe Story Labs to provide a fellowship for women writers over 40 working in the genre. And there's a whole lot more in your bio. You're an incredibly busy lady. All kinds of stuff going on in your world.
Yes.
So welcome to Let Fear Bounce.
Thanks.
It's nice to have you. Yeah, and I'm fascinated by those who write or work in the horror genre because my brain does not go that way. It steers clear of it. So I'm just fascinated by the folks that do write that. So what spurred you to get into that genre to begin with?
Probably from every horror writer you've talked to, we've watched it or read it way too early. We've seen terrible things that our young eyes shouldn't have, and I'm no different. I was a latchkey kid in the early 80s. So my oldest sister is 10 years older than me. I was reading everything that she was reading, which was early Stephen King, Ray Bradbury, which I still absolutely adore. Ray Bradbury, his work ethic is something I aspire to. But yeah, it's reading the things that she was, getting into. I was reading like Carrie and his short story collections, and then like watching horror movies. When I grew up, you came home from school, there was no prime time yet. That didn't really start to like the middle of the 80s or late 90s when we were having like the Thursday NBC blocks and we were having things later. But you could come home from school and watch like American Werewolf in London. It's what was on HBO when you came home if you had cable. So I got really exposed to horror really early. And what I discovered about the genre, at least for me, was that I really liked being scared. I really liked it. And I, as a kid who has to not necessarily fend for themselves, my mom went to school at night and worked a full-time job, but, you spend a lot of your time in your own imagination. And I really liked continuing on and being like the hero of my own little horror story. And then I started writing what I guess is now considered fan fiction when I was really young. So I didn't want the horror story to end. I wanted the characters to go on and do something else. So I would write stories that they were, going on, a new adventure or something scary that was happening to them. And that's really how I got into the genre as a writer, as a lover of it, just being scared. I think that's it. And I think it's funny because a lot of people are just like, oh, I could never write horror. Like you said, my brain doesn't go there. But I always say everyone can write horror. There's a way you can. Because if you were anything like me, who is anxious all the time, can imagine worst case scenario. You just have to imagine worst case scenario for a character, and there is your horror story.
Right.
Like you have created it. And that's kind of what we do as authors, is we put our characters through the worst case scenarios and see how well they survive, if any. So
and see how they survive.
Simple as that, pretty much.
So I like how you said now I grew up the same way.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was working a couple different jobs, and we came home after school or after whatever sports activity that we were involved in at the time, and pretty much took care of ourselves. And I'm an avid reader, always have been. And
Mhm.
in that time frame, I read all the Stephen King stuff. I
Yep.
waited for the next one to come out because I too at that time enjoyed being scared crapless,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and watching the movies and, you know, having, you know, your sister, you'd be at a friend's house and you'd be watching the movies. And there was this place where I grew up that they had all these little rooms. It was like an old house, but they had all these little rooms with a big television set in each one. And you paid to rent that room to watch horror movies.
What? That is the
And
greatest idea ever.
I think it only lasted a couple years, but we
Oh
went to
no.
it. So we'd get like four of us friends
Yeah.
and whoever had the car pull all of our dollars together to pay for it and just be scared. And they're screaming our little heads off because, you know, Stephen King and Pet Cemetery and Carrie and
Yep.
all the, you know, what was
All the good
the
stuff.
one Chucky.
Oh, Chucky.
I mean,
I did
and
not
I
like him.
loved those. I loved reading those books. I loved watching those movies. And here's the thing. There was a shift and I no longer could watch them.
Oh, wow.
Couldn't watch them, can't read them. And I just cannot. And might be because I went through my own trauma.
Hmm.
And ever since then, can't do it.
Yep.
I
I
mean,
mean, that makes
complete
a lot of
switch.
sense.
So that's why when I said my brain can't go there anymore, it
Hmm.
literally cannot. I cannot watch it. I can't even make myself watch it or,
That's is so
or read it.
interesting because it's as my training is for behavioral sciences and cognitive behavioral therapy, so emotional reactivity to things, um, and people and situations and learning how to kind of navigate through the trauma. I never really say anything is recovered where it's all maintenance, where
I
it's
agree.
yeah, definitely
As
maintenance.
one who lives with PTSD, I
Yeah. Yeah.
agree.
Hello. That's actually what really sent me to get my behavioral science degree was my own personal trauma. I'm an assault survivor. And I work with women who have been assault survivors or in other particular traumas. And everybody kind of has a different way where things either kind of switch off or things will swing the other end of the pendulum where whatever scares you or whatever you're trying to get through, you almost embrace.
Right.
And we have a lot of even just like horror fans, seen a lot of horror fans be like, this movie scares me to death. Here's my tattoo of, the movie that scared me, or the movie that reminds me of this terrible trauma is on me now, or I've written a book about it, or and I think it's just very interesting that horror has that type of effect on people, whether it's either end of the pendulum swing or it's just like, no, it's just not my thing anymore. It's just difficult for me to put myself in that anxious situation. But for others where it's really cathartic for them, which is what my lecturing is on, is trauma in horror cinema. So women's trauma especially, but kind of branching out and not trying to be as gendered, but because we all are humans and we all have a lot of the same emotions, but understanding how that type of genre really teaches you how to behave, I think. Being scared teaches us how to, react to particular parameters. I mean, we all check the back seat when we get into a dark car. Like we didn't learn that watching a drama. We run to our bathroom from our bedroom and back to our bedroom in the dark. This is our house. Nothing's in here that wasn't there in the light. But I think what's so beautiful about the genre, and incidentally what you had said, is just knowing that this is where I need to put the brakes on in this particular. It just doesn't make me comfortable anymore. It's not comforting. And for some, it can be incredibly comforting. I think that's such a wonderful mark of how expansive it can be to some folks. It's just really, really cool that it can be so many
Either.
things, so many different people. Yeah.
And, and I never looked at it that way or thought of it that way, that it can actually be cathartic for some people to
Yeah.
actually experience that anxiety and fear. For me, I'm the other end. I
Yeah.
can't, if I know something is, I will not purposely put myself in a situation
Yep.
where I
Probably
will
smart.
be overly anxious,
Yeah.
and upset and edgy. That's how I always put it, edgy, you know. So that's interesting. Very interesting stuff there.
Yeah, I think that what's really fun about that, and not, fun like good times, but I think what's interesting about it is that, you do have so many people on either end of the spectrum. Do you read it anymore, or do you just
No,
not
I
watch it?
steer
Just
completely away
cold
from it.
turkey. Yeah. Yeah. So
So that's what I find it, because I loved it. I did up
yeah.
through the age of probably 18. I mean, we had so much fun getting the crap scared out of us.
Yeah.
And even reading the books, I would sit there, and as soon as you'd shut a Stephen King book at nighttime and turn off the light, and you're laying in your bed and you're like, you just know, you
Yeah.
just knew that all the characters from that book were now under your bed.
Yep. Make sure your sheets are covering your feet.
Oh yeah, nothing can stick out.
What's very interesting is that's one of Stephen King's biggest fears, is his feet being outside of the covers.
His his brain is an amazing thing.
Mm-hmm.
For all those books that he wrote.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's gotta, I think it'd be his brain, I think, would be a frightening place to visit.
Yeah, and I think what makes his
For me, it would be anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think for any of us, we're just like, Stephen, are you okay?
I think for any author,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of crazy in there.
Oh yeah, we kind of have to.
In order to have that creativity, something happened in your life,
Yes.
you in general, to bring forth the creativity and for it to blossom.
Yes.
I write a lot of nonfiction, but
Which is really tough.
I have a huge, very vivid imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working on a fiction story, but I'm able to bring in a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
And that came naturally to me. And I've spoken to a lot of people that say, I can't write that. I struggle to write something that's going to make somebody cry or laugh out loud.
Yeah.
And for me, I just write from the heart is how I always put it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's something happened, and maybe some authors aren't even aware of it.
Yeah.
But something happened to spark or trigger or whatever you want to call it, that little creativity. And it's like, what, I'm going to start writing about that stuff.
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, even as a kid, and I think even, coming from a childhood that was very difficult. I mean, my parents got divorced very, very young, when I was very young. So it was, kind of learning to, kind of balance and kind of mind ourselves and occupy ourselves and things like that too. It wasn't necessarily a huge upheaval, but it was a new learning experience. And I think I kind of dove into, being such a voracious reader as an escape. And I think that, that definitely helped me. Like, I feel like I'm on the other end where I'm just like, horror really helped. But I have talked to a lot of folks where there was just like this situation or what this film or what these films or books make me feel is very similar to what I felt when I was in X situation. And that's never fun. That's a confrontational,
Right.
feeling. And it's hard to get over that hump. And some folks never do. And that's fine. That's still part of the healing process, is to know your limits and your boundaries, and having a strong boundary is a-okay, especially in dealing with that. But I think what's so interesting about somebody like Stephen King, because I've gotten the question, well, you don't look like you write horror. You don't look like a horror writer. And I'm just always wondered what people expect out of that. Like,
what does a horror writer look like?
I don't know, gothy, always in black. Like, and I'm incidentally wearing black today, folks, but I mean, not my point. But I think like even him, like he's very unassuming, a little bit nerdy, like not the type of guy that you would be like, oh, this guy's writing things about, reanimated zombie cats and young
right.
And like it's wild to kind of think how horror kind of gets othered a little bit and a little bit like labeled as to not a standout genre. And I think I think it'll always sort of be that way, where it's not the Academy Award winning genre. Like, I don't think
but there are, I have found over the last few years doing this podcast, there are quite a few female horror writers.
There's a bunch of us.
Yeah. Well, and I never, since it's not something I gravitate towards,
Mhm.
I was surprised a bit just because I didn't know.
Right.
Just, there's so many. And I'm like, well, this is fascinating. I find it fascinating, actually. Because I applaud anyone who takes the time to write books, no matter what genre.
Yeah.
Because it's not an easy journey. It takes a lot out of you emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, everything, and it's not, people say, oh, you wrote a book, when's your next one coming? It's like, do you have any idea?
Gosh.
Do you have any idea what it took to get this one? Do you have any idea?
And that's what's funny too, is because publishing is actually quite glacial. So it takes a while to not only create the art, but also kind of get things moving, marketing wise, editing wise, cover,
right. If you do it right. If you do it right, yes.
Yeah.
It takes should be like, at least a year.
Yeah. I mean, at least a year. And you'll see folks kind of have a rapid fire for a while. Like, didn't you just have a book out? Now you have another book coming out. But it's also like, yeah, well, I also submitted both of those books at the same time. And now we're finally seeing the fruits of the labor from it. And so it's like, that's so sad. Like, can you just enjoy the book I made right now?
Right.
Why are you asking me for another one?
Right. But that's a good thing too. Yeah. They want to know what's coming next. Yeah. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool.
They need another fix.
Yeah. Always. Yeah. For those who need that fix.
Yeah. Yes.
I just find it fascinating. Yeah, because it's not a realm that I'm in. And but I also like learning about it too. I never want to sit there and say I don't like it or anything like that. Some of the stuff I might not care for. It's just not my thing. But I'm not going to say, oh, I don't like it or I hate that, because I know what it takes to get a book out.
Yeah.
And so that's why I appreciate all authors,
Yeah. And what's interesting about having, because that question's posed to a lot of us who are women horror authors. It's almost kind of underground seen as like a boys club, or women shouldn't think that way, or women shouldn't have those horrific ideas. But what's interesting about it is that there's so much of women's pain and women's trauma that is mined for horror cinema. So why wouldn't we?
And and I'm always thinking, like you said earlier at the beginning, anybody can write a horror story. You just take your worst case scenario, turn it into a character, and see if it survives.
Yep. As
you were saying that and sharing that, I just loved how you explained it, because it was so simple. Made me go, duh, of course, yes. Because there is not a person on this planet that cannot tell me that they have never had a dark thought.
Right. 100%.
Not a single person. You could be, I don't know, I can't even think of a good example, but everybody has dark thoughts. Everybody. Yep. Or you've been through a dark experience, and then that twists things just a smidge. It just does. I've had dark thoughts. I honestly think I could write a really scary book. I think I could. If it would be any good or not, I don't know. But I'm pretty darn sure that I have enough stuff in my brain that I could pull out and put it into a book.
Yeah, we all do. I think that you're right on the money with that. Like, we all have.
I think people are afraid to let it out or to admit it, though.
Oh yeah. And that's kind of what my book is about. Is my book Love the Sinner. It's called Love the Sinner: 8 Disquieting Stories Bound in Sin. So it's based on, each story is based on one of the 7 deadly sins, and then I always say with one bonus sin, which is basically a cardinal sin or a mortal sin for folks at home. But the devil doesn't feature anywhere in any of the stories. It's just people justifying horrific acts to get what they want. And I think that we're all kind of capable of doing that. I mean, anyone that's watched a true crime documentary will tell you.
Anybody watches, all the stuff that's on, there's so much on TV, CSI, NCIS,
Yep.
all those kind of shows,
Mhm.
which I actually enjoy watching some of those, but some of them turned so dark as the seasons went on, I had to quit watching them.
Yeah. And it's all in here. It's all in the mind. It's all in the heart. And it's always, we can justify doing what, crimes of passion. Obviously that's lust, envy. You have something that I want, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to you to get it done.
Or
Pride. Yeah, or
protecting.
protect myself. Pride. You made me look bad, so now I'm gonna do like it's
Right.
all there within us to do, and that's what I really love about that collection. It's a short story collection, but what I love about that is really featuring how man is the scariest monster.
Oh no, I absolutely agree. No, it is. That's why,
Mhm.
man is the monster. That, they can blame it on what they want, but
Yep.
we have free will and we make our own choices. And if you
Yes, we
choose to be
do.
evil and choose to do evil, that's on you, you know.
We'll
Um,
justify it whatever way possible. We'll be like, well, I had my reasons.
it's like, okay, yeah, your reason. Yeah, all I hear is blah, 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 blah.
Right? The Charlie Brown teacher.
Right. Right. Right.
Wah, 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 wah,
That's
wah.
right. I always wondered what she looked like.
It's just her from like the neck down. I guess they
Always
were like,
wanted to know. Always
not
wanted to know.
not important, I guess.
Oh,
So
it's because I like how they put those little things in a lot of shows and cartoons and things like that that they just don't show you.
yeah,
They just give you that
give you a
peek.
little taste.
Yeah, and you have to think about it and try and figure it out. There was the other show. There was the other show about it was I think, oh, what was his name? Can't remember, but his neighbor was always
I almost said Home Depot. Home Improvement.
yeah, with his neighbor always, you could only ever see his eyes above the fence.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
can't remember the neighbor's name though. It's not Will. It's I don't know. It's something. But Wilson. No, it's not that either. I don't know. Maybe
but Wilson sounds good. I think it is
Wilson
Wilson.
maybe.
I think it is Wilson.
Yeah. Is it
Anyway,
Wilson? But yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
those
Created
little,
a whole persona. Didn't even need to be seen. Whole
no, I
persona.
know. I think it's fun.
Amazing.
Yeah, all those little things those little things that they can put in. And people, what do they call those now? They call them Easter eggs. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you put stuff out, and like even on cars, they do that.
Mm-hmm.
My Jeep, when I bought a Jeep, it was literally right at the beginning of the pandemic, right before the pandemic hit. And the salesman says, now let me know if you can find the Easter eggs. And I said, I have no idea what you are talking about.
Easter eggs, sir.
He goes, look for the Easter eggs. And they're little pictures of the Jeep driving over different things
Aww.
throughout the Jeep. And I'm like, I go,
Fun.
show me the first one. And so he showed me the first one. It's at the bottom right-hand corner of my windshield.
Aww.
Never would have seen it or ever noticed it unless he pointed it out. So he goes, I'll let
Right.
you find the rest. I go, do you know how many are on this particular one? And he says, yeah. He goes, I'll let you find the rest. I've found 3 so far.
Oh, how many are there supposed to be?
I don't know. He wouldn't tell me.
Aw. Well, then how do you know if you found them all?
So I think that's interesting. Well, that's part of what makes it fun, you know? So, hey, there's a question then that just is bringing me around, says how my brain just kind of goes down different little paths. Little Easter eggs or little things like that, that you hint at something, but never quite give all of the information. Do you put any of that in your books?
Absolutely.
You're one of
Absolutely.
those evil people.
I am. Well, I like to, and especially any horror writer, even a sci-fi writer for that matter, because it's all fantasy and at the end of the day. But I think what's important is the foreshadowing that makes you think about when you hit the ending is that, oh, I should have seen that. I didn't know that meant so much, or I didn't know what that meant at the time, which I find incredibly interesting. If whoever, if those of you that are listening, probably one of the best ones I've seen do that, and someone will chime in and say something else, but has been Saw, the first Saw movie, where
I did not see it.
It definitely takes a strong stomach, that movie, Cast Iron. But it's once they start revealing the ending or why these two men, it begins with two men who were chained to pipes in this dilapidated bathroom. And as they kind of backtrack, and it almost like opens up this Pandora's box, like, oh yes, that was in the beginning, and oh, they were doing this and they were doing this and they were here the whole time. And that's so fun to put something over on your audience and really get them in the end and be like, oh, like you had said that, or you knew they weren't going to go in there but you didn't say why. Oh, it's because this, or they already knew that this was. And that is fun. And it's
the one example I have of that, and I think anyone who ever watched the movie felt the same way, was The Sixth Sense.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And you're like, oh my God, he was dead the whole time.
Yeah, and you go back and you're like, that's why the mom never talked to him. That's
Yeah, and there's all these men watching it going, wow, his wife, she's just like mine, she never says a word to me. When you're going through all this, at the end you're like,
have you checked if you are dead, sir?
that was an amazing movie.
Yeah,
that one really was.
That was great. I mean, he did the same type of steps with The Village, with really opening that up. And I think that that's what's really fun about creating within genre, because I mean, even in comedy, because I also write I come from the screenwriting world, so I have written comedy and horror, which are very similar processes, because you need a reaction out of your audience. You got to kind of reverse engineer it. What do I want out of my audience? Do I want them to cry, laugh? Do I want them to relate? Do I want them to just have a hearty escape? That's your comedy. Do I want them to be afraid? Do I want them to wait to the next sequel? Do I want them to be invested in this horror character? It's all really trying to get a reaction out of your audience. And I think Easter eggs and foreshadowing are so effective for that, because you have to, especially with horror. And I've watched a few horror movies recently that will remain nameless because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, that I just was so bored with. And I was like, why am I picking up and checking my phone? Like, why am I carrying on a conversation here on the like, if you don't give your audience enough to stay invested, that really hurts your story. And books as well, not just cinema. But if you're just trying to tell the story you want to tell without using devices to engage your audience,
well, heck, even a 60-second commercial.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of those. What did they just say? What are they selling? I don't know.
Some of those though, you watch those commercials and you're like, I literally have no idea what they're selling me.
Yeah.
Trying to sell me. And I'm thinking, is that, obviously they did it on purpose, but is it brilliant or not? I haven't quite figured it out yet.
Nope, it's not. I solved that for you. It's not brilliant. It's not brilliant at all. But I feel like that's you need those type of things to kind of carry your reader or your viewer along, because you get used to just being like, this is a story I want to tell, no holds barred. I don't want any notes on it. I just want to tell this story. And then you miss those little pieces where people want to hear it or want to play along with you. So I think Easter eggs are so fun for that, because then you're like, well, what else did I miss?
Right. See, that gives, and you could use that in many ways, not just writing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it gives us all something to chew on and think about.
Yes, it does.
How we can work that in. How we can work that in different things. How fun. What a fun little exercise that
I know. Look at it. You came here to learn, kids.
That's right.
We're here for you.
Today's episode is sponsored by the letter H for horror.
For horror. Oh, I love it.
It's Sesame Street. Now I'm going down a different path. Sesame Street, and who is the Count?
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 3.
And incidentally, I just did that at my day job today. So it's the second time I've done it today. Wild. As an adult.
Isn't that interesting how that all comes together?
As an adult.
All the things that we've learned from Sesame Street days, and we're still talking about them all these years later.
funny. Too
Classic.
funny.
It's classic stuff. So what is next for you, Mo? What is coming up next?
Ooh, I have two books coming out. It's a 2-volume book set next year with Spooky House Press. And that one is also 2-story collections. There, it's called Claire Violence, Tales of Tarot and Torment. So each story is based on a card from the major arcana in the tarot deck. So
Oh,
really interesting. That's a fun one. This was very this book, Love the Sinner, was very dedicated to really sticking with the devices of the sins. But this next work is really fun. I really got to expand into, you know, sci-fi horror and grief horror and ghost stories and lots of really fun things to do with this one. So I'm really, really excited about that. As my other hat is a member of Nyx Horror Collective, which we talked about at the top of the hour. We're in our 3rd year with Stowe Story Labs. We provide a fellowship for women over 40 who are writing in the genre, which we know women as an accessibility standpoint is very low for us in the industry. And if you're over 40, also incredibly much lower accessibility in the industry for opportunity. So we saw that disparity and we really wanted to fill that gap. And we're in our 3rd year and we're really, really proud of that. And I'm still going to be continuing lecturing on trauma and horror cinema internationally into the new year. And I will be heading to London very soon. So I'll be there for quite a while.
what are you going to do there?
Yeah, I'm going to be writing. So taking a little sabbatical, writing, and just kind of get my creative juices flowing. London's my second home. So I just love what that city brings to me, especially on an eerie aspect. It's very ghost story laden out in the countryside. So
Well, there's
it's
so much history there.
oh, absolutely. And I've loved it ever since I was a child, and I didn't go until I was in my 30s, and I've never looked back. I'm always there when I can. During the pandemic, it killed me because I usually was there like 2 or 3 times a year, and then I didn't get to go for about 5 years. So I kind of
Now,
took
do you have a place that you regularly rent, or is it a different place each
oh, I
year?
have friends out there now, and you know, I hang with them, and I couch surf, and you know, just gonna spend a little time out there getting more of my creative piece and building out more of my cinema piece and connecting with universities to bring a lot of my lecturing to that side of the world. So
To
I'm
that
really
side of the big pond. How
yeah,
awesome. That's
yeah,
exciting. That's
yeah.
exciting.
I
Well,
try.
enjoy that and
Thanks.
soak it all up, as I'm sure you will.
I will.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. This has been fun. The time goes so
It
fast.
does.
And you tossed out some good nuggets for me, so I appreciate that. You gave me a few things to think about and look at horror in just a little bit different way. So
Sure.
I appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Oh, of course.
Now, I ask all of my guests before we wrap up if they would toss out a nugget of hope for the listeners, something that they can tuck away and carry with them for the rest of the day. So, what would your nugget
Yeah.
of hope be?
Ooh, I love this. I think this is such a positive thing too, because we have so much bad news and we don't get to the good news, and hope stuff is fantastic. So I always say, and just kind of talking about where I'm in this kind of whirlwind of my life, you know, I'm in getting into like middle age and, you know, reassessing things and feeling like you should be at a certain place at a certain age is such a trap. And a lot of us are finding our second careers. A lot of us are getting bored with what we thought we were going to do for our entire life. May that be relationships or work or whatever trajectory you thought your life was going to take on a spiritual level. One thing I always try to let myself or remember or let myself live within is that there is always another day for another chance. So you can screw up as much and you can do all the bad things to yourself. You can eat terribly, you can drink too much, you can stay up too late. There's always another day for another opportunity to care for yourself, health wise, emotionally, mentally. And as long as you are always staying sound with the fact that it's okay to consistently make mistakes, it's very brave to say, I don't know. And it's no is a complete sentence. So make sure that you keep your boundaries with others, and that'll help you keep your emotional and mental state where it needs to be for you to take better care of yourself, because you are the most important person in your universe.
Mic drop. Couldn't agree more, dear heart. Couldn't agree more. As one who has reached a certain season in life myself,
Yep.
I came to a realization about 4 or 5 years ago. Yep, boundaries are going up. Yep, not doing that anymore. Brings me no joy. Don't know why I was doing it for so long.
Yep.
I made a lot of changes and my tribe shrunk. You know, I had to call some things.
Yeah. And it's interesting once you start choosing yourself, how your tribe kind of takes care of itself. Like
it does. It really does. Yeah. You don't even
anymore.
have to ask. It just kind of fades away. And that's okay. That's okay. And I have found that since I've done that, I'm much more easy on myself. Much easier on myself. And I sleep just a little bit better.
Yep. And you're surrounded by the people who are okay with you choosing yourself first.
Yes. It's amazing.
Yep.
So don't wait until you're, until you're in your 50s to do that, folks.
Yep.
And it's
not agree like more.
So many people I've talked to, it's they hit this certain age and that's when they do it. I'm thinking, but why? Why do we wait?
Because we're trying to be nice. We're trying to be likable.
And trying to go with the flow. Don't rock the boat. Do this, do that. You have all these names and boxes that these titles: mom, coworker, colleague, wife.
Lots of hats.
All these hats you're supposed to wear, and everybody expects. And so it's like you're getting brainwashed by all of it.
Yeah.
Until one day you're like, maybe you're not a wife anymore. Maybe you're divorced. Your kids are grown and on your own. So you don't have to be mommy 24/7 anymore. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I even like to do anymore.
Yep. And then you got to reassess. I mean, we're raised as caregivers, women, and predominantly those who make these choices late in life are predominantly women identifying people, because we're raised as caregivers, but not for ourselves, for other people.
Right. And we forget the most important one. You can't help anybody else if you're not healthy.
Yes. I would say probably my second nugget of hope would be, please put on your mask before helping others. Like they say in the airplanes, please put on your own oxygen mask.
Yes.
Before helping others.
That's a very good mental. Yes. That's a very good visual for people.
Yes.
Especially women, honestly.
Yes. Please put on your own mask.
See, look at all the topics we covered today. Whole therapy session in there for everybody.
There you go. Great. I hope you enjoyed.
All right. Well, thank you once again for being my guest today. This has been awesome. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I had a great time.
And everybody out there listening, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did and spending time with myself and Mo. So tune in each Wednesday, folks. That's when new episodes upload. This is Kim Langling, your host of Let Fear Bounce. Everybody be well, stay well, and be blessed. And that is a wrap, my fearless friends. Thanks for bouncing along with me on another episode of Let Fear Bounce. I hope you're feeling a bit motivated and ready to take on any challenge that might come your way in the coming days. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Let Fear Bounce. Tune in each week for your dose of inspiration from my amazing guests from all over the world. So until next time, keep bouncing forward and stay fearless, my friends. Everybody be well, stay well, and above all, be blessed.